Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Patriots History. I'm Larry Swikart, co-author of Patriots History of the United States with Michael Allen. And as I was doing Marbury v. Madison the other day on Wednesday, I found that I had somehow missed one of our documents, George Washington's first inaugural address. So I'm going to step back and read this. It will appear in the series as lesson 54A. 54A. That way I don't have to renumber everything. It should just slide right into the list. But if it doesn't, you know where it goes. Okay. And I am reading from Patriots History Reader. You can download this on the web if you find it, but I'm using the reader version. George Washington took his oath of office as the nation's first president on April 30th, 1789 in New York City on the balcony of the Senate chamber at Federal Hall on Wall Street. He had been unanimously elected president by the first electoral college, in which each elector cast 2 votes. John Adams was elected vice president. With the second highest number of votes, Robert R. Livingston, the Chancellor of New York, administered the oath of office. Following the swearing-in ceremony, Washington gave the following address to a joint session of Congress inside the Senate chamber. This address is the gold standard by which all subsequent inaugural addresses should have been judged, and 3 features stand out: a trust in and reliance on God, the lack of any specific program or agenda other than to fulfill the duties of the office, whatever they might be, to the best of his ability, and a promise to take no pay other than a reimbursement of expenses. An air of remarkable humility also emerges. The effect generated was one of extreme nobility, something that many subsequent presidents have never attained in practice, particularly in modern times. Although it is popular for modern candidates to disavow any ambition to be president, Washington actually ran away from the job as best he could. He literally had to be talked into taking the position after he had already been elected. He could have made almost any demand in exchange for his services, but he did not. The reader should note the similarities and differences between Washington's address and those by more modern presidents. Washington's humility is as sincere as it is apparent, and his reasons for serving for 8 years in an office he truly did not desire set the standard by which all subsequent presidents should be measured. First inaugural address. Fellow citizens of the Senate and of the House of Representatives, among the vicissitudes incident to life, no event could ever have filled me with greater anxieties than that of which the notification was transmitted by your order and received on the 14th day of the present month. On the one hand, I was summoned by my country, whose voice I can never hear, but with veneration and love, from a retreat which I had chosen with the fondest predilection, and, in my flattering hopes, with an immutable decision, as the asylum of my declining years, a retreat which was rendered every day more necessary as well as more dear to me by the addition of habit to inclination and of frequent interruptions in my health, to the gradual waste committed on it by time. So Washington is saying, I really didn't expect this. I kind of hoped not to get it. I was running away, as it were. And among other things, my health was an issue. And so I didn't want to spend all my last years here in Philadelphia, but nevertheless. On the other hand, the magnitude and difficulty of the trust to which the voice of my country called me, being sufficient to awaken in the wisest and most experienced of her citizens a distrustful scrutiny into his qualifications, could not but overwhelm with despondence one who, inheriting inferior endowments from nature and unpracticed in the duties of civil administration, ought to be peculiarly conscious of his own deficiencies. This is amazing. Washington is telling you why he does not deserve the job. Can you think of anybody really since, I don't know, the Civil War who would come out and say such a thing? In this conflict of emotions, all I dare aver is that it has been my faithful study to collect my duty from a just appreciation of every circumstance by which it might be affected. Sorry for the throat clearing. I've done my news today. It just builds up. Such being the impressions under which I have, in obedience to the public summons, repaired to the present station, it would be particularly improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that almighty being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect, that his benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States a government instituted by themselves for these essential purposes, and may enable every instrument employed in its administration to execute with success the functions allotted to his charge. So Washington says, I want to thank God for being here. I want to pray for him to give me strength, guidance, direction, fill all my deficiencies, as he would call them. In tendering this homage to the great author, God, of every public and private good, I assure myself that it expresses your sentiments not less than my own, nor those of my fellow citizens at large less than either. In other words, I'm sure you agree with me that we need God on this project. I'm not sure he could in all cases, but nevertheless, he's saying, boys, you better believe. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than those of the United States. Every step by which they've advanced in the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. Translation: Washington says we wouldn't be here without God, that it seems like at every key moment, God put his hand on the scales in favor of the United States. And in the important revolution just accomplished in the system of their united government, the tranquil deliberations and voluntary consent of so many distinct communities from which the event has resulted cannot be compared with the means by which most governments have been established without some return of pious gratitude, along with a humble anticipation of the future blessings which the past seem to presage. In other words, we're not like other nations. We seem to have had it better than other nations. God seems to have been involved in our history, unlike other nations, he's saying. These reflections arising out of the present crisis have forced themselves too strongly on my mind to be suppressed. Now, I mean, get this. Washington says, thinking about God and his role in the founding of America has pressed so strongly on my mind, I'm going to take up about, let's see, 1/3 of my first inaugural address, thanking God. Try that someday for a new president. You will join with me, I trust, in thinking that there are none under the influence of which the proceedings of a new and free government can more auspiciously commence. By the article establishing the executive department, it is made the duty of the president, quote, to recommend to your consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. The circumstances under which I now meet you will equip me from entering into that subject further than to refer to the great constitutional charter under which you are assembled, and which, in defining your powers, designates the objects to which your attention is to be given. This is actually pretty funny. Washington is saying, now, what am I going to do as president? It's in the Constitution. Read it. What are you going to do? It's in the Constitution. Read it. That's pretty cool. let's see. It will be more consistent with those circumstances and far more congenial with the feelings which actuate me to substitute in place of a recommendation of particular measures the tribute that is due to the talents, the rectitude, and patriotism which adorn the character selected to devise and adopt them. In these honorable qualifications, I behold the surest pledges that on one side no local prejudices or attachments, no separate views, nor party animosities will misdirect comprehensive and equal eye, which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests. So on another, that the foundation of our national policy will be laid in pure and immutable principles of private morality and the preeminence of free government, be exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens and command the respect of the world. So he's saying that basically, I'm trusting you will act on good morals and will act within the purview of the Constitution. That's why I don't need to lay out a whole bunch of I promise to do this, that, and the other. I dwell on this prospect with every satisfaction which an ardent love for my country can inspire, since there is no truth more thoroughly established than that there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between genuine maxims of honest and magnanimous policy and the solid rewards of public prosperity and felicity. Since we ought to be no less persuaded that the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained, and since the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered, perhaps as deeply and finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. So there was kind of a warning there. If you don't operate as heaven would like to see you operate, you're not going to see continued blessings here. That's something for a president to say. Beside the ordinary objects submitted to your care, it will remain your judgment to decide how far an exercise of the occasional power delegated by the 5th article of the Constitution is rendered expedient at the present juncture by the nature of objections which have been urged against the system or by the degree of inquietude which has been given birth to them. In other words, I remain, it's up to you to decide what's going to happen in terms of objections you may raise to my policies. Instead of undertaking particular recommendations on this subject in which I could be guided by no lights derived from official opportunities, I shall again give way to my entire confidence in your discernment and pursuit of the public good. For I assure that while you carefully avoid every alteration, which might endanger the benefits of a united and effective government, or which ought to await the future lessons of experience, a reverence for the characteristic rights of freemen and a regard for the public harmony will sufficiently influence your deliberation on the question how far the former can be impregnably fortified or the latter can be safely and advantageously promised. So again, I'm not going to make a whole wish list of things I want passed. I'm going to leave it up to you to operate within the bounds of good sense and the Constitution. To the foregoing observations, I have one to add, which will be most properly addressed to the House of Representatives. It concerns myself and will therefore be as brief as possible. When I was first honored with a call into the service of my country, then on the eve of an arduous struggle for its liberties, the light in which I contemplated my duty required that I should renounce every pecuniary compensation. From this resolution, I have in no instance departed, and being still under the impressions which produced it, I must decline as inapplicable to myself any share in the personal emoluments which may be indispensably included in a permanent provision for the executive department. I'm taking no money, no salary. That doesn't mean somebody else might not. It means I won't. I must accordingly pray that the pecuniary estimates for the station in which I am placed may, during my continuance in it, be limited to such actual expenditures as the public good may be thought to require. Having thus imparted to you my sentiments, and they have been awakened by the occasion which brings us together, I shall take my present leave, but not without resorting once more to the benign parent of the human race and humble supplication that he has been pleased to favor the American people with opportunities for deliberating in perfect tranquility and disposition for deciding with unparalleled unanimity on a form of government for the security of their union and the advancement of their happiness. So his divine blessing may be equally conspicuous in the enlarged views, the temperate consultations, and the wise measures on which the success of his government must depend. Man. So there he is again, referring to God in the entire last paragraph. The first 3 paragraphs, or was it 4, and the last paragraph. So maybe half of Washington's entire inaugural address is directed at God and pleading for God's help. Pretty remarkable. And that's why he's that guy. I'm reminded of a Bruce Willis Die Hard movie where he's talking with a young guy, a kid who's a hacker. The kid's saying, why do you do these things? He says, well, somebody's got to do it. And the kid goes, that's what makes you that guy. That's what made Washington that guy. See you back here Monday.